Welcome everyone to the first meeting of the Environment and Sustainability Committee. The first item on the agenda is the notification of Chair and Vice Chair. Council appointed Councillor Joshua Schumann as Chair of the Committee and Councillor Tim Wotherspoon as Vice Chair for 2020-21 at its annual meeting on the 19th of May 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. I'm mindful that on my watch it's just 9:59, so we'll wait one more minute to see if Councillor Gardner can join us at 10 o'clock. And hopefully he'll be able to join us for the meeting. I know that he is previously been around this morning, so it may just be a connection issue. So if, with members' agreement, I'll just wait a few moments to see if we can get a full house with our members. I've just sent Councillor Gardner a message and hopefully he'll be able to join us in a few moments. But as with the virtual meetings, there are some things to go through, which I know Councillor Gardner will be very familiar with. So I will make a start and hopefully he will join us before we get onto our substantive agenda items. So firstly, before I go on to the scripted part, and I'd like to thank the Democratic Services officers who have provided a few words for me to say, and apologies for those that are watching on YouTube, and to some of the members that I will be reading from a script for some of it, because I don't want to get the important information wrong. But before I do that, just to welcome you all, officers and members of the public, to the inaugural meeting of the Environment and Sustainability Committee. I hadn't thought a few years ago when I became a member for the first time that we would have a committee with such an illustrious title that has such important business to go through, but I'm incredibly pleased that we have, and incredibly honoured to be chairing the first meeting of it. So welcome to you all. For those that have worked with me before in other committees or across other parts of the council, you'll know that I try at the most part to work in a collegiate way and keep everybody as much as we can together. I'm sure there'll be times when we have slightly different approaches, but our goals will be very aligned to try and achieve what we can within the remit of this committee. So although we may be coming from a slightly different angle, let's try and ensure we keep it good-humoured and polite at all times, because there will be, I'm sure, the majority of our business will be able to work together and get the best outcomes. So I will move on to the scripted statement, which is I have to read out for the benefit of the public. And I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the council's website. Due to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the provisions set out in the Local Authorities and Police and Crime Panel Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority and Police and Crime Panel Meetings, England and Wales, Regulations 2020, and with Cambridgeshire County Council's own virtual meeting protocol. A decision summary and minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the meeting page of the council's website. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the committee to keep their video cameras switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep their microphone muted, except when I invite them to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. Any members wishing to ask questions or make comment should indicate by clicking the raised hand function on the right-hand side of their screen, and that's in a participants list. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your questions, and then mute again to allow the officer to respond. There'll be no points of order or personal explanation. As with all new meeting arrangements, especially those involving new systems, there's always a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I will ask for your patience if we do. Should this occur, I would declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault and the meeting may be abandoned until such time it can be reconvened. Please also note that to facilitate discussions, I intend to waive the committee procedure rule limiting members' contributions to 5 minutes. I also propose to allow members to speak more than once on each item, if appropriate. However, make sure that your contributions remain concise and to the point. I remind members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded. So with that announcement, we move on to, we've done agenda item number 1, and thank you, James, for the confirmation of the chair and vice chair. So we move on to agenda item 2, and apologies for absence. And I'll hand over to James Veach, our democratic officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, with no apologies.
Thank you. And I hadn't noticed as I was reading my script that Councillor Gardner has joined us. I'm pleased you're
Yes. Thank you very much, Chairman. 1 or 2 problems this end.
No problem. It's to be expected, and I'm glad you're able to join us. So before we move on to the next agenda item, I'm going to just do a quick roll call. I'll begin by calling the names of all the members of the committee to establish your presence. Please unmute. Sorry, I've just lost the page. Please unmute your microphones and just confirm that you're here when I read your name. So, Councillor Anna Bradman.
I'm here.
Councillor Dupre.
Present.
Councillor Gardner.
Present.
Councillor Gowing.
Present.
Councillor Hudson.
Present.
Councillor Scott.
Yes, present.
Councillor Shooter.
Present.
Councillor Wilson.
Present.
And Councillor Wotherspoon.
Present.
And I'm here, and I presume you can all hear me from your responses. Good. So we'll move on to our next agenda item. Oh, sorry. In agenda item number 2, we have the declarations of interests. Do any members wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or non-statutory disclosable interest? If you wish to do so, please raise your hand on the raise hand function. Good. So that being the case, we will move on to agenda item number 3. The public petitions and public questions. Today we've received 3 public questions from Mrs. Marilyn Smith, Miss Nicola Ellerton and Miss Susan Wells. In accordance with the County Council's virtual meeting protocol, each person has been asked to submit their question in writing, and there will be no opportunity for them to ask it, as there will be no opportunity for them to ask it in person. A copy of the question has been circulated electronically to all members of the committee and in advance of the meeting and published on the Council's website. Under the Council's Constitution, Part 4.4, Paragraph 9.1, the Council restricts public questions at committee to items which are related to the agenda items. And although the 3 questions I have received today are not related to our agenda, I've decided to use my discretion and allow the questions and provide a response. I welcome the public's contributions to our work on the environment, but would ask that in future questions are related to our agenda so that we can ensure that any comments and questions can be debated and included in the committee's deliberations. I will now ask James, if you don't mind, reading out the questions for the benefit of the public and press. And as I said, there'll be no opportunity for members of the committee to ask any clarification, but I will read out a response, which will also be circulated electronically afterwards. James, if you'd like to read the first question from Marilyn Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Dear Chair of the Environment and Sustainability Policy and Service Committee, I write as Chair of Arbury Road Residents Association. During the 7 weeks of lockdown, many residents came to appreciate fresher air and reduced noise as a result of the drastically reduced traffic on the road. But now, as the traffic has gradually increased over the past 3 weeks, a marked change has occurred already in both noise and traffic fumes. While both walking and cycling more within the community itself are essentials, we have become also acutely aware of the strong smell of diesel. This is a particular concern for children using the street to walk, cycle to and from school and the shops, as well as residents, children who have to live with it daily. We normally have severe congestion on a daily basis on this narrow part of Arbury Road, where there are no cycle lanes. So children in prams and on cycles are a particular concern too. Havenfield, a sheltered elderly facility, is on this narrow stretch, and many residents are afraid to walk to the shops nearby because of the congestion. The Climate Change and Environment Strategy, section 5.4.2, says that the Council is planning to tackle the problem of air pollution. Now the problem is more urgent than ever because of the pandemic. Scientists have shown a link between air pollution and virus transmission, and we're concerned things will become worse. Our families need to be able to safely breathe when we go outside for essentials, exercise, work or school. So we ask how the committee intends to protect and improve the air quality on Arbury Road for the residents, as well as those local businesses on the road. We feel that this is now a matter of great urgency for our well-being. Yours faithfully, Marilyn Smith, Chair of the Arbury Road Association.
Thank you very much, James. And now I'd like to read the response and start by thanking Cheryl French and the team for helping me draft the response to Miss Marilyn Smith's question. An Air Quality Management Plan, AQMP, 2018-23 for Cambridge was originally produced in 2018 and subsequently updated in March 2019. Cambridgeshire County Council and Public Health both inputted to the development of the strategy and its implementation. The link will be available in the electronic response and can be found at cambridge.gov.uk. There are 7 main areas for the actions, including reduce emissions from taxis by requiring low emission taxis, reduce emissions from buses and coaches, reduce emissions from HGVs, reduce emissions from all traffic, other traffic by providing better public transport, maintaining low emissions through the planning process and long-term planning, improving public health and leading by example. In support of these main areas of action, Cambridgeshire County Council is delivering the following cycling schemes across Cambridge. Brooklands Avenue, new cycle markings for shared use path. Rustat Road, widening gated access to enable cyclists easier access. Maids Causeway, Cambridge parallel crossing. Oxford/Windsor Road, Cambridge, enhanced traffic calming with cycle-friendly measures. Stories Way, Cambridge, redesigned traffic control measures to improve cycling links. And Barton Road, Cambridge, to improve pedestrian and cycling crossings. As an immediate response to COVID-19 crisis, a number of pop-up cycle lanes will be delivered starting this week to increase safety and uptake of cycling. And they can be found at Shelford Road, Milton High Street, Girton Road, Chesterton Road, King's Hedges Road, Trumpington Road and Trumpington Street. In addition, this council is looking to agree a new policy in July 2020 for additional tree planting on the highways, working to a 2-for-1 replacement where trees are removed. Progressing plans to allow 2-wheelers and electric cars to use bus lanes to encourage clean vehicles. Working with the Greater Cambridge Partnership to trial electric buses ahead of closing access to bus lanes for non-electric buses after 2021. And looking to work with schools to plant trees from October when schools are reopening as part of a project called Rooting for the Future. I hope you will see from the actions that this council has taken and continues to take, we are making significant changes and commitment to tackling what we believe is an important issue. Thank you for highlighting your particular concerns, and we will continue to monitor and evaluate the changes that we are making to improve the air quality at this location and throughout the county. Thank you. I will now move on to question 2. And this question is from Miss Nicola Elliott. And again, I'll hand over, if I may, to James to read out this question.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the Cambridge Green Party, I would like to raise questions about biodegradable packaging waste management. In response to a Freedom of Information request, it's been revealed that the composting facility at the Waterbeach Waste Management Park cannot compost biodegradable plastic packaging, and this is sent to landfill instead. What steps are being taken to address this lack? In the post-COVID-19 world, we will need to urgently address environmental issues, and as more businesses switch to biodegradable or compostable packaging, it will be vital that waste management develops to be able to process this waste. Otherwise, the efforts of businesses and individuals are diminished. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And now the response. And again, I'd like to thank Quentin Carroll, who has helped provide a draft for this response. Residents must not put biodegradable plastics into their green waste bins, as it is impossible for collection crews to tell the difference between biodegradable and non-biodegradable plastics, and the bin will not be collected. Even if the plastics are EN 13432 certified or display the compostable seeding logo, they do not compost quick enough to completely break down in our in-vessel composting process. The compost material that is produced from the in-vessel composting process has to be tested in order to meet the British Standards Institution's publicly available specifications 100, or PAS 100, composting standard. If the tests show that the compost material contains more plastics than the standard permits, the whole batch is considered not fit for purpose and cannot be used as a certified compost. If the compost produced repeatedly fails the test, the accreditation for the Water Beach in-vessel composting facility will be lost. We ask that residents to put biodegradable plastics into their general waste black bin, as this waste is processed through the Mechanical Biological Treatment Facility, or MBT, where the waste goes through a composting process before the product is landfilled. Even though the biodegradable plastics will not completely decompose, the MBT composting hall, treatment composting mass will be reduced before landfilling. Our district and city councils request residents do not put biodegradable plastics into their mixed dried recycling blue bin, as the sorting machinery at the materials recycling facility only selects recyclable plastics. So biodegradable plastics will end up in the rejected materials and then sent to an energy recovery facility. Links to the videos showing how and what happens in the vessel composting materials recycling facility can be found at the Recap Waste Partnership website. And that's at www.recap.co.uk. The Government's Environment Bill introduces a series of measures that will fundamentally change the way government, business and individuals produce and consume products. New government powers will set reuse efficiency standards for products that will help drive a shift in the market towards products that can be more easily recycled, as well as products that last longer and which can be reused and repaired more easily. Consultations are in progress on measures such as plastic packaging tax, deposit return schemes, and consistency in the materials that are collected for recycling. The produced extended producer responsibility scheme will seek to make producers more responsible for the full net costs of managing their products at the end of their life. The bill will help move our recovery away from the take, make, use, throw system to a more circular model. And that's the response. Apologies, members, there's quite a lot of technical detail in there. So again, that will be circulated electronically and provided to the questioner. And our last question, we received question 3, and I'll hand over for the final time to James for this question. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the Green Party, I would like to ask the question. The County Council updated draft climate change and environment strategy acknowledges that the demand for water resources to support growth could place our region's natural capital at risk, and that by the 2050s, there is predicted to be a shortfall of 5 to 17% in the amount of water required to meet demand. Our valuable chalk streams, a key part of Cambridge's natural capital, are directly threatened by over-abstraction. Last year, there were major reductions in flow, with some streams drying up. Even after a wet winter, the flow in the Cam lags behind that of other rivers in the UK. The strategy only promises to work with other bodies to consider suitable actions to manage this risk, whilst the evidence points to an urgent need for action to dramatically reduce abstraction and develop new approaches, many of which are being used in other parts of the world. How will the Environment and Sustainability Committee address this issue, and will the Council give a timetable and commit to implementing recommendations? Thank you.
Thank you, James, and thank you for the question. Again, the response provided for Ms. Susan Wells is, this is a national, regional and local priority that water and sewage companies and the Environment Agency are tasked with working on. Our partners are already working hard to manage water resources while protecting natural capital and enhancing environmental benefits. Cambridge Water's 2020 to 2045 Water Resource Management Plan, which can be found on cambridge-water.co.uk, sets out plans to meet water demands for growth for the next 25 years, optimizing supplies, demand management, and leakage reduction. The water company has amended their chalk aquifer abstraction licenses so that more water remains in the environment during periods of low rainfall. In addition, our water companies are committed to working with councils and developers to support and incentivise water efficiency in new developments. Further questions on the WRMP will need to be directed to Cambridge Water. Water Resources East, a multi-organisation water resource partnership, is working on a regional water resource management plan, which will be reflected in the Cambridge Water and Anglian Water's 2023 update to the water resource management plans. These plans will consider opportunities to deliver enhanced environment outcomes, such as restoring flows in chalk streams. We intend to work closely with its partners, and this year we are seeking to establish a project for the River Granta with Water Resources East to try and deliver local improvements. The project brief is currently being prepared by the partnership and project timetables have not yet been set. The Council's aims is to ensure that the project delivers benefits for nature and has a clear understanding of the impacts of the intended future increases in river and groundwater levels on flood risk. Our role in that project will also involve supporting local engagement and seeking to understand how to maximise the natural capital and multi-benefits of future schemes. Thank you very much. That concludes all the public questions. And as I said, those responses will be provided to the questioners after this meeting. So we move to our next item on the agenda. We have received no petitions. So we move to our next item on the agenda, which is agenda item number 4. And this is the COVID response, the Cambridgeshire County Council's COVID response to COVID-19. Before I move to the officers to introduce this report, and that will be our Officer Graham Hughes will introduce it, I need to read a statement which explains the reason this report has been produced late and is a matter of urgency. Officers have been asked to bring a report on the COVID-19 response to date for those services for which each policy and service committee is responsible. A similar report will be brought to each future meeting until further notice. Given the rapidly changing situation and the need to provide the committee and public with the most up-to-date information possible, I have accepted this report on the following grounds. Reason for lateness: to allow the report to contain the most up-to-date information possible. And the reason for urgency: to enable the committee to be briefed on the current situation in relation to the Council's response to COVID-19 for those services for which it's responsible. Graham Hughes, our Service Director for Highways and Transport, will introduce the report, please. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and good morning, members of the committee. I'm actually going to be very brief in introducing this report. I'm sure you've all read it very closely. This is the second one of these reports. As the Chairman said, they will come regularly to committee, and this is the second cycle of the report. I would point you mainly, members, to section 3 of the report. So this part outlines over the last month or so the key actions that have taken place in place and economy in relation to the COVID-19 crisis. Now, I think probably slightly different to some of the other reports that go to committees, because a lot of the issues within place and economy are very much intertwined between the remit of this committee and the remit of the Highways and Transport Committee. What we've actually done is listed all of the key highlights across place and economy over the last month. Just for easy reference, Chairman and members, what we've done is in section 3.1, the elements that are highlighted, bold highlighted, are the ones that essentially relate to the Highways and Transport Committee, and the items that are not bold highlighted, so all of the others, are the ones that specifically relate to this committee. But as I say, quite a few of the things do cross over between the remits. So as I say, we thought we'd present the full set. So Chairman, I think I'll say nothing more in introduction, but between myself and Cheryl French, who is present, we will attempt to answer any questions from yourself and members. Thank you.
Members, you've received the report, and the report is available online for others and the members of the public to read and note. Do you have any questions or comments? I've already seen a couple of raised hands, so I'll first move to Councillor Lorna Dupre.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've got a number of comments and questions about this. Do you want me to take them all as one hit? Yeah.
I think in the interest of the virtual platform, it'd be helpful if you could put them all to the officers, and I'm sure they'll make some notes and come back to you on all of them. Thank you
very much. Firstly, on 1.1 on the background, we're told that over 220,000 people have been infected by the COVID-19 virus. That's going to be a wild underestimate, isn't it? Because that is only the confirmed cases. And to have a confirmed case, you need someone to be symptomatic and to access a test, and for that test to come back as positive. So these are only tested positive cases. And bearing in mind that up to half the population who acquire the virus will not be symptomatic at all, we can expect the numbers to be many times more than that, and certainly the self-tracking app that King's College London have been using was running at something like 10,000 new cases a day 4 or 5 days ago. So I think we need to be aware of that and to be rather more cautious in our language, that the numbers are going to be far higher than that. Secondly, on 2.1, I was very impressed to see that this committee got a report on COVID last month, because this committee didn't exist last month. But also 2.2, the COVID weekly report link at the bottom of that page didn't seem to work for me. I don't know whether I just did it wrong. On 2.3, we're told that we're awaiting further guidance on our role in the tracking and tracing. Now, I realise that that is not the responsibility of this committee, but I didn't know whether we could be told, bearing in mind that this was launched today, albeit without the app, the rather controversial app. I didn't know whether we were aware of having had that further guidance and whether that has altered anything in officers' view that they were expecting to do. And to point out in that same section that we will be responsible for, as an authority, for communications to amplify the national messages. And I think we need to recognise that in view of the events of the last week or so, that is going to be very much more problematic for this authority as members of the public become increasingly disenchanted and cynical about what is going on and what they're being told to do, rather than what they see other people actually doing. On 3.1, we are presented with a lot of key highlights, and we're told that they're presented for the whole of place and economy. Now, we've seen that quite a lot in other reports that we and other committees have had, that there's a lot of stuff there, and it's hard to pick out sometimes what's relevant to us and what's not, and it's sometimes very tempting to comment on things that are not our remit. However, in this case, we're being told they're being presented here because of the cross-cutting nature of a number of the activities. Now, I don't know whether that gives us kind of carte blanche to be talking about potholes and all sorts of things that are in this report that aren't actually to do with this committee. I kind of hope in a way it doesn't, but equally, I do think that there is an argument to say that this committee should maintain some kind of cross-cutting remit for everything that has an environment and sustainability implication. And I'd like to ask, firstly, whether the chairman is opening up open season on all of these things, because I think certainly if I were commenting on some of these things, these bullet points, I would want to say, for example, that the introduction of 1 or 2 of the pop-up cycle lanes, certainly the one in Milton, has not been met with unalloyed enthusiasm. And there is a suggestion that that will do very little to encourage people to take up cycling or to cycle more often. But equally, I think I'd like to ask the chair whether there is any view that this committee might want to take on more effectively that cross-cutting role across the work of the other committees, because I think that would be useful, and whether he will come back to us, perhaps in consultation with the Chair of Constitution and Ethics, within the next 6 months or so, to have a look at how that could be achieved. Then in that same section, we are told about staff being redeployed to the hub, and I know that's had to happen and they've been doing a fantastic job. I wanted to know how many of those redeployed staff were working on environment and sustainability projects, because again, this is a report for the whole of place and economy. So have we got people who are working on the environment and sustainability agenda in the hub at the moment, and what is the effect of their redeployment on the timetables for all the things this committee was supposed to be doing? And finally, you'll be pleased to hear, also at the last part of that section, we see that there are going to be draft action plan being shared with the committee, this committee, I assume, next month, but it doesn't seem to appear in the committee's forward plan.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. I'll just respond to a couple of those points before I bring in Graham, who may be able to give some more of the answers. I'll take the last point first. If there is a commitment to the action plan, then we may need to we have our agenda item later, which is to note our training and agenda plan and our outside bodies, and we can include the addition if Graham wishes to include that report in the action plan. If it's not for next month, it may be for a subsequent meeting, but you're absolutely right that if we've made a commitment, we do need it on our agenda somewhere. Then with regard to the couple of the other comments, firstly, hopefully a very quick comment. I've just clicked on the link again on the report, and the link has taken me straight to the COVID reports page. So I have checked that. It may be something that IT can help with. With the comment on the previous committee, I think it's probably the officer's intention that they have reported to a previous committee, not this previous committee. And there would have been obviously somebody overseeing this business previously, and it would have been to that committee in its previous carnation that the report had come. But it's a fair point to say it was not this one. And lastly, and probably most importantly to me, to respond to the really important question you raised about how this committee will function across the council. And I've had discussions with officers already about this, and I think it's fair to say that the vision is that this environment committee and its business will be a golden thread that will go through a number of areas of the council, if not all areas, much like, and we have the chairman of public health sat in this meeting, much like public health does. And that although it's hard to see the public health links to something like potholes, you don't have to scratch too deeply before you realise that actually there are significant public health implications of potholes and people falling off bicycles, etc. So in a similar vein, this Environment and Sustainability Committee should have a golden thread through a lot of the business of the council, if not all. And we will be ensuring that our policies and strategies that this committee approves and works on absolutely has that key golden thread going through, so that we can make sure our business is linked to all of our agreed policies that come from this committee. So I hope that's a helpful response. And I agree, this is obviously as I said, the inaugural meeting, and there will be some work in progress about how that is worked and how we include it in the business across the council without interfering in the important service committees and their roles that they have to play. So it will be a kind of a work in progress, but I certainly see it being that golden thread. Your other questions, I will hand over to Graham and or Cheryl, who I hope will be able to provide some responses to those. Graham.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Dupre, for the questions. Hopefully I've noted them down, all of them down, so I can cover them for you. I think your first comment on 1.1 was just a comment. I'm not an expert in the numbers. I mean, certainly I have heard reports, as you suggest, that the actual number of people is higher than those diagnosed through testing, but I can't add more to that. On your point about extra guidance in terms of track and trace, I have to say I'm not aware of, since this report was written, and this is only 2 or 3 days old, the report, what extra guidance has been received. But as I'm sure members are aware, the track and trace system has gone live from this morning. So what I will do, Councillor Dupre and members of the committee, is I will find out what extra information there has been since the report was written, and ensure, Chairman, with your permission, that we'll circulate that around committee members. Then just coming on, I think there were just 2 final comments or comments and questions you made in relation to paragraph 3.1. You touched on the issue of the cycle lanes, and as the chairman said in relation to one of the public questions, that there have been a number of cycle lanes that have already been put in, pop-up cycle lanes, and there are some more planned, and indeed there will be a rolling programme of them. As you say, Councillor Dupre, there has been some concern about particularly the lane in Milton, and I was in correspondence with a number of members and CamCycle yesterday on that. Essentially, what we've done is we've identified places where we think there is some benefit and where we think that schemes could be put in quickly to get the pop-up lanes going. There will be more coming. In terms of Milton, we've actually provided the maximum amount of space that we can for cycles. I know some people feel that that's not appropriate, but certainly, given the standards and the available space, we've provided the most possible, and we think there will be some benefit. But as I say, there will be more coming, and we will learn as we go through the process. On your second point, Councillor Dupre, about staff being redeployed, I'm not aware. I know how many have been redeployed, and at one point across place and economy it was just over 80. I think, again, because of the cross-cutting nature of work, I know there were some individuals, for example, one specifically from Cheryl French's team, but I think there are a number of the people who have moved into the hub who have been working on activities that are very much related to this committee. What I can say to members, though, is clearly they have been doing very important work within the hub. Most of them have been used contacting the shielded groups. But what we've actually now got is a programme of bringing those people back over the next 2 to 4 weeks. And so within that period of time, we will then be back to full strength in all of our areas. So any programmes that have been diminished as a result will then be able to get back up to full steam. Again, though, Chairman, what I can do, because the numbers are available, I just don't have them to hand, is I can let members know from which areas people have been redeployed. So, Councillor Dupre, you'll be able to get an idea of what areas could well have been affected. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Graham. And yes, circulating those numbers afterwards will be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Could I come back quickly on just a couple of those? The first thing I wanted to say about the cycle lanes, that yes, I appreciate the need to put up something quickly. But I do think there is a danger that if we end up spending all of the money that we've got for this on paint to paint cycle lanes where people don't feel confident or don't feel that they are of the kind of radical design that's needed and don't have the community support behind them, then that's going to be very disappointing, and there is a danger of the whole exercise being brought into disrepute. And I think we do need to think about engaging people and getting their confidence that what's being put in place is actually of the radical kind of standard required and is really genuinely transformative in a way that I'm not convinced people think the Milton scheme is. On the environment and sustainability projects and the redeployed staff, what I was really after was what knock-on effect has any redeployment had on the plans that we had for the work we were going to do. And it's that rather than just the numbers that I would be interested in. You know, such and such a project will be delayed by 6 months or whatever, is the kind of information I was looking for.
Thank you. And with regard to some of those environment projects that sit particularly within Cheryl's French team, we do have timelines and project plans for each of them. And I'm sure Cheryl will be happy to provide an update if there are any movements in those as a result to members after this meeting. Thank you. I will move on to the next question from Councillor Graham Wilson. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on that point, could we in next month's report have an update on what the implications have been of these people moving across to the hub? I think they're doing sterling work in the hub, but clearly if there are projects that are slipping or perhaps are going to not get delivered, then we should know about them. In section 3.1, I got confused as to what's in bold, what's not in bold. That I didn't think we were responsible for pop-up cycle lanes or for busway passengers. And if we should have more of a role in pop-up cycle lanes, then at some stage, I feel we should be discussing the list which officers have put together and be assured that local members are being fully consulted on local schemes, because I don't think they are at the moment. The other point I wanted to raise was on the household recycling centres. I have already been in contact with Graham and would like to congratulate the staff on how well these have worked since they've been reopened. I went to the Alconbury recycling scheme site and was impressed by the queuing arrangements and the social distancing, which was ensured once you got onto the site. So I think that has gone extremely well, and I'd like us to record our thanks to staff for getting that going.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And just on that last point, before I bring in Graham to respond to your first comment, I have had equally pleasing comments from members of the public about the household recycling centres, and Councillor Julie Wisson has forwarded a comment on from a member of the public who has thanked us for the excellent work that they're doing there. And I personally had a friend of mine yesterday who contacted me, who visited the recycling centre at Waterbeach, who made the same comment, who said that there's a fantastic system in place. So please pass on our sincere congratulations to all of the team. Graham, if you would. So Graham, if you'd like to respond to Councillor Wilson's first comment, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you also, Councillor Wilson, for making those comments. There was a huge amount of work that went in from Highways colleagues in terms of the traffic management and obviously the waste team. So I will certainly pass that on, and I think the team will be very appreciative of that. So thank you. Just really, I think a couple of very brief points that you made. Certainly in terms of impacts, I mean, very much in the same vein as Councillor Dupre's question. Yes, I'm sure we can add a bit more information at that point for the next report on which projects, if they've been affected. We have tried as much as we can to move resources around to avoid any impact, certainly on critical projects, but certainly we can report on that next time. And then yes, I do take your point, Councillor Wilson, about the cycle lanes and the busways. I suppose when I put the report together, I was trying to sort of, maybe it's not quite the clear committee split, but I was trying to think about things that are very, very much related to the agenda of the committee. So I think, as the chairman said, even things like potholes, there can be a sort of once or twice removed relationship, but I do think issues certainly around encouraging modal shift, cycle lanes, public transport, etc., are very, very much sort of front and centre in terms of the objectives of this committee. So that's why I'd put them in that form. But I think you are, I mean, strictly speaking, Councillor Wilson, you are correct. They are within the remit of Highways and Transport, and in fact, there will be a paper going to Highways and Transport on the 16th of June, actually setting down all of our plans for the pop-up cycle lanes and also the recovery actions to allow for social distancing by reusing highway space in all of our centres across the county. So as I say, you are correct, Councillor Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have a question from Councillor Jocelyn Scott. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a number of issues under paragraph 2, 3 and 6. So I'll begin with paragraph 2.1. There's a reference in paragraph 2.1 to the sheltered groups. And I simply wanted to raise this because quite a large number of residents have already been in contact about receiving this text message to say they're no longer in the sheltered group, and they're expressing extreme concerns about deliveries of food and so forth. So I'm just highlighting this because I'm sure that the county is already aware and will be taking steps, but I'm speaking up for the residents who've been in contact with me about that point, because there is extreme concern out there in the community about A, being notified in this way, and B, being notified at all without having had any assurance from their medical practitioner that they're somehow no longer in this sheltered category. So that's that point. Now, in paragraph 3.1, there's a reference to the reinstatement of parking enforcement. And I do want to emphasise that in the area that I represent, and I would say it's possibly likely in other areas, when the restrictions were lifted, we did understand it, and that it was to facilitate people who needed to visit persons for whom they were caring or to whom they had obligations and whom they wished to assist, so that they could park in a residence parking area and not be in trouble because they didn't have a permit. However, this has been abused, is the information that I'm receiving, and people in a particular residence parking area of which I'm thinking, with which I'm familiar, they have said that cars have come and parked there for extensive periods of time, that there's been problems with rubbish being just distributed on the street and so on. So I simply emphasise that we will appreciate very much the parking enforcement team's return. But I should add here that I do wish to give a a note of appreciation to Philip Hammer, the officer in charge of the parking enforcement, because when I got in touch with him at the behest of residents about this problem of cars parking and noise and rubbish, he responded very promptly. So thank you to Philip Hammer in that regard. Also, I need to I suppose, agree on this issue about the pop-up cycle lanes. We, of course, are very appreciative of the fact that pedestrians and cyclists are gaining greater attention, and that's a very positive thing. I want to speak up for both of them because I'm a cyclist, but I'm much more often a pedestrian, and pedestrians are so often overlooked in terms of the whole question of perambulation. But this is a very good initiative. However, I also would have to agree with my colleagues, Councillors Wilson and Dupre, that there is a need for consultation. We don't want endless consultation, but there needs to be an assurance that councillors for the various areas are being consulted, both in our case of Cambridge City as well as county, and I would expect out in the Cambridge Shire elsewhere district councillors, and so as well as the county councillors. And I wanted here to say that there are some initiatives here that I wanted to emphasise that have been taken that are very much appreciated. In Cambridge, there are some very narrow bridges, and there was attention immediately paid when I raised this as Jesus Lock Bridge and the Mill Road Bridge. No once. However, a number of the residents are saying that the notices are very small and therefore they're not exactly the issue of the need to appreciate the fact that social distancing should be maintained, at least in terms of people coming one after the other. The notices really are required to be larger. I appreciate they're having been put up, but there is this problem. Now, also under 3.1, I think that we're going to be a team of cheerleading team on the whole issue about recycling centres, because I have to say as well that I've had absolute plaudits from residents who've been to the recycling centres and had really good reception. They've been able to deliver their recycling materials, and it's been smooth, it's been swift, it's been smartly handled. So yes, I add mine to Councillor Wilson and to Councillor Schumann. Now, I think I'm coming to the conclusion. I just wanted to say in relation to paragraph 6, that there's a reference there to the workforce, and I have been receiving, and my colleagues have been receiving too, real concerns about personal protective equipment for people who are working in the care homes and in other areas. There's a reference in paragraph 6, I think it was in paragraph 3.1 about personal protective equipment going to from Skanska, etc. But in terms of the workforce, it really is essential, and there does seem to be some, I might say, confusion perhaps, in that some accounts from on high, from the official level, I'm not saying within the county, but I'm saying from the official level on high, is that there's quite sufficient personal protective equipment, but from the workers on the ground, we are not hearing that, and from the union, particularly from Unison, so I must speak up on that point. And then also there's a reference in 6.2 to the anticipated pressure that will be on in terms of referrals to the children's services and so on. And I want to emphasise here that there will be an absolute need for attention being paid, because we know that criminal assault at home statistics have gone up, and that's an inevitability, sadly. It's a global issue, and they've gone up globally. I'm involved in the European women's lobby, the Observatory on Violence Against Women, and it's happening everywhere. But we need to be mindful that there will be pressures, and those pressures do have to be paid attention to. And if I could just add on this note, 2.1 refers to vulnerable children, and this 6.2 refers to the pressure in terms of referrals in children's issues and so on. And I do want to take the opportunity here to refer to the question about the schools, because we must ensure that when children return to school, and schooling is vital, education is vital, there's no question about that, but that health and safety is put at the first step, because there are children, there are parents, there are teachers, they all have families, there are the cleaners at the schools and so on. My final point is that I was in conversation with someone on Tuesday evening who was absolutely laudatory about the school where her children are and the steps that are being taken there. But the schools need real support in terms of being able to ensure that when the children return, there are proper protections in place for everybody involved. And I do caution about this return on the 1st of June. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I'm mindful that some of your questions don't link to the business of this committee, but and I appreciate you making the comments, but I'm sure Graham will respond to any points that do particularly relate to this committee. But before he does, I just wish to pick up on your first comment around the concerns around vulnerable people and shielded people who have received or have concerns about the support they get. And just to reiterate, the county's contact, if you have concerns, at cambridgeshire.gov.uk/coronavirus, which you can find details of the coordination hub, or can contact the county coordination hub on 0345 045 5219. So if you have specific concerns, just for the benefit of the members of the public, please do contact the county coordinated hubs. Graham, did you want to respond to Councillor Scott's other questions, particularly the ones related to the business of this committee?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a few, and I will try and be brief. I think, Councillor Scott, you talked about the reinstatement of the parking enforcement. We are looking at it closely. We did say at the start that it would only be temporary, of course, and we said we would monitor it. We produced the team, as you said, led by Phil Hammer, have produced a reinstatement plan, so they're kind of ready to go. At the moment, as a working assumption, we're thinking it's probably going to be around about, or probably no later than the 15th of June, because clearly, all other things being equal, that's when a lot more activity will start to return. But we are monitoring it, and we are ready to go when we feel that it's the right thing to do. And we are working closely with the City Council on that, because they're also looking at when it would be appropriate to reinstate charging within their car parks. So we want to make sure those things tie in. In terms of pop-up cycle lanes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, consultation is always important. There's a balance here between getting things in quickly and lots and lots of consultation. They are all temporary schemes, so we wouldn't, I think, expect to go through the normal processes. We did want to get some out on the street just to sort of test reaction and to get going, but I can assure you, Councillor Scott, that we will work with local members and the communities as much as we can for future schemes. You mentioned the narrow bridges, and you and I have been in correspondence on those before. I mean, maybe that's something that I can pick up with you, and if there are any other issues from members outside of the committee. But I mean, if there are specific issues that we can deal with under our recovery plans to ensure that people can physically distance and so on, then we're very happy to try and pick those up. So maybe, Councillor Scott, we can have a conversation outside just to understand particularly the issues. Thank you for the further commendation to the HRC, Household Recycling Centre staff. I'll pass it on. As I said earlier, they have done a fantastic job, so I will make sure that they're aware of that. And then I think finally on the PPE, I won't comment on the broader issues. I mean, there is, I think, probably other than to say there is a lot of PPE in the system now, and there is an awful lot of work going on with care home providers and so on. What I would say, though, in terms of our people, and the people that, if you like, deliver services sort of more relevant to this committee, can I say, so that's particularly people like Skanska and some of our other contractors. They have their own means of sourcing, but they are, I can absolutely assure you, very, very rigorous in making sure that their people are appropriately protected. And indeed, that's why for a period of time we had to change some of our methodologies on street, because Skanska had provided the FFP3 masks into the health system and therefore couldn't do tasks that otherwise would require them. But I'm pleased to say they're back now and fully operating. But all of our own employed people are now contractors. We do have very high requirements in our contracts, high requirements for PPE, and so that is provided to protect all of those people. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Graham. We now move on to, Councillor Scott.
Yeah, could I just come back really quickly? I'm so sorry, Chair, but I should have actually referred also to the question of buses. I know it's the other committee, but I do hope, Graham, that we really can't give up our emphasis on the importance of public transport, because there really is a big fear that there will be a concentration on people coming in cars, and we really can't give up on the buses, and every support that can be given to Whippet and Stagecoach in terms of reinstating their services and implementing social distancing, which they can do on their vehicles. I think that many people would be most appreciative. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you for the comment, Councillor Scott. And just to give hopefully a little bit of assurance, I sat on a meeting of the Combined Authority Bus Task Force, where this exact issue has come up about how we support the providers to make sure that they can provide the best possible service and safe service going forward. But I'm sure Graham will also note your comments that we continue to support the bus services in how we confirm sustainable transport. Councillor Bradman, you are next on the list.
Thank you. Thank you. I wasn't quite sure if you could see my raised hand. Thank you very much. Actually, I also sit on that bus reform task force group, and I'm also very keen that that we should be encouraging people to use public transport. So anything that can be done there, I would support that completely. Right. So one of the things I wanted, so a couple of things I wanted to ask about were the pop-up cycle lanes. Graham Hughes and I have discussed this by email. I just really wanted to urge that before you install these, you actually do ask the local member first, because you would appreciate that a lot of the media excitement about the lanes in Milton was generated because whilst we've been asking for ages to have the cycle lanes repainted in Milton, this being the formal agreed on carriageway northbound cycle lane and the shared use on the footpath on the east side of Cambridge Road. And by the way, it's Cambridge Road, not High Street. There's no work been done on the High Street. The road that it's been done on is Cambridge Road, which is what caused some confusion in the first place. So whilst we were pleased to see those lanes repainted, we were somewhat dismayed by the southern cycle lane that's been introduced on the, as it were, the east side of Cambridge Road, because when we went through the process of deciding how to arrange cycle lanes in Milton, we deliberately didn't put one on the carriageway because we knew that the road, Cambridge Road, is narrow in places. And the reason that there's been such a ruckus about it is because cars who have suddenly found themselves with less, I'm doing this, less road space, are uncertain what the cycle lane line means. In other words, am I allowed to cross it? Which on the western one, we've all got used to the fact that that's a solid line and we shouldn't pass it. But of course, then if people also don't want to cross the dashed line, which as you've told me indicates the temporary cycle lane, then actually there is barely enough room for cars to park. And we're actually getting confrontational situation in the middle of Cambridge Road, which people aren't sure who should give way. So it's actually in some ways, there are some elements of it I'm very pleased with, but the fact that the residual road width is so narrow is actually being quite dangerous, because then people are at the last minute swerving off in order to avoid hitting a car coming in the opposite direction. So a little bit of consultation with the local members would have really helped there, because we could have explained why we never put one on that side of the road. So one of the things about that is, I'm not saying I subscribe to this, and I want to take this to the parish council next week, but there has been some suggestion that the dashed cycle lane might need to be removed because it's causing danger. Now, as I say, we haven't decided that. We haven't agreed. That has yet to be agreed by the parish council. But are you prepared to remove, if you think elements of what you've done are dangerous? So that's the first question. The second one was, again, thank you very much to the traffic management teams who've been set up at the household waste recycling centres, as well as the teams in the centres, because they're doing an absolutely grand job, and over long hours as well. They're having very long, because they've got to be there an hour before the centre opens and tidy up after the end. And the other thing I wanted to raise was the business of PPE. Now, I know I don't know where it fits in the life of the county, but my concern is that the NHS, of course, as a big purchaser, are being able to commandeer large quantities of PPE. And although we get lots of things from the government saying we're looking after the care homes now, actually, I know as I sit as an observer with the Cambridgeshire Care Providers Alliance, and they are struggling to get PPE. They are having a constant battle to get PPE of the quality and the specification that they need. And they have asked directly to the county council, could the county council assist them in working alongside the NHS so that they can coordinate their purchasing and procurement of PPE. Now, they were told no on a previous occasion, but please can I just point out that, echoing what Councillor Scutt has said, there is not plenty about. It's hard to get, it's hard to coordinate orders. People are being advised to order small quantities because they're easier to deliver in short term, but actually people are trying to be careful. And in fact, the Cambridgeshire Care Providers Alliance have one member who is coordinating the procurement for the whole of Cambridgeshire because they are finding it so difficult. So please don't go away thinking that procurement of PPE for care homes is easy, because it is not. And don't forget, this is not just care homes, it's people providing care in people's homes who are still having to go in and do that. And it's in children's homes as well as retirement homes. So there's a lot of that there. So please, as I say, I'm not sure this is the right forum, but please can you feed that up to the relevant people, because they would really like some support with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradman. And I don't wish to kind of dismiss your comments in this forum, but I don't believe it probably is the right forum for our E&S committee. We have an adults committee and a children's committee, which obviously look at the other areas that you've mentioned. But the comments are still rightfully made, and your concerns have been raised. And I'm sure Graham will speak with his director colleagues to ensure your comments are taken up. But just the issue you raised around the cycle lanes does sit within this committee's remit, so I'll ask Graham to respond to that part. Thank you. Oh, Graham, you appear to have been frozen. We may have lost Graham on this connection. So, Councillor Bradman, apologies, but it seems that Graham has either temporarily or maybe even permanently lost connection with this meeting.
He's in theory still in the meeting.
I can see the camera, but I think it's...
No, I mean on the participant list, which is...
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I will hopefully, Graham will be able to reconnect shortly and respond to that question. If not, then the specific questions around the Cambridge Road I think it was the east-bound cycle lane that's been put in that you raised concerns with, and the
No,
general
no,
question about, sorry.
No, it's the southbound cycle.
Southbound, thank you.
To Councillor, Mr. Hughes separately, but I would just urge that there is consultation with a local member first.
And that's what I was going to say. Thank you, Councillor, and your comment around consultation with local member, I'm sure will be noted. And Graham will possibly respond to you following the meeting if he's not able to reconnect. Councillor Gardner, is this a question for Graham? Because I'm mindful now that we've lost Mr. Hughes.
Yes, it was really, Councillor.
Okay.
It was. So
well,
I don't know if you want me to go through that, or I can send a note to Graham after the meeting. I'm quite happy.
If you don't mind tabling the question, and hopefully Graham will be able to provide a response to you personally, and we can hopefully include it in the minutes if he hasn't returned by the time you come back. So if you'd like to pose your question, and we'll make sure that your response is provided. Sorry, before you do so, James, I've noticed you wish to speak.
Sorry to interrupt, just to inform you that Graham Hughes' laptop has died, so hopefully he will be restarting it and joining the meeting shortly.
Thank you. So we'll take the question anyway, Councillor Gardner, and hopefully we'll be able to provide a response.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, with regard to the pop-up cycleways, I wondered whether there was any plans to have such pop-up cycleways for rural areas to enable people in the rural areas to get into the towns and cities locally. At the moment, I haven't seen any in my rural area, so I wondered whether that was a situation that we were going to look at. And then just to say, I would like to thank the staff for all their hard work at the recycling centres. We did, as I cover Alconbury as what is in my division, the recycling, we did have a few issues early on with regard to traffic around the Alconbury Centre and the diversion routes that the staff had set up. But that issue has now gone away, and I would like to thank the officers for that personally. But that was really all I had to say, Chairman, at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner, and we'll certainly note your thanks and the comment around the Alconbury Recycling Centre. The question around the rural pop-up cycle lanes, again, we'll have to, hopefully, either Graham will join as I take Councillor Hudson's question. If not, we'll be able to provide a written response. But it's a very good question, and I think we need to make sure that these pop-up lanes do support our rural communities where they can. Thank you. Councillor Hudson. Oh, sorry, did you want to come back, Councillor Gardner? No.
I just wanted to thank you for those comments.
No problem. Thank you. Councillor Peter Hudson. Was this also a question for Mr. Graham Hughes?
No, Chair, just a general comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I have to say I've spent the last half hour sort of trying to work out which committee I was attending. But I just want to talk about the input from this committee around the whole of the council and the golden thread you mentioned earlier, and you mentioned public health. It's important to remember something that is the pure remit of another committee should be left to that committee. Public health have staff, experts and public health consultants spread around every part of this council, giving input, advice and technical issues for their papers and for every bit of work that this council does. And that goes into the papers and goes to the relevant committee. It's worth noticing really that we can't have two committees doing the same work, and I don't think this committee should get bogged down in the work of other committees. As members, I have attended committees as Chair of Public Health. I've also attended other committees as a local member on issues. Yes, the cycle paths, etc., do come under this committee, but a lot of what we spoke about doesn't come under this committee. I think it's worth remembering that this committee has really lots of important work to do, and we should look at the golden thread from the public health and try and copy that as best as we can. Thank you.
Councillor Hudson, as always, incredibly salient point, and we have a light agenda today with only one item left, so I've allowed some of the comments to stray a little bit, but it is important to note that this committee has a vast remit, and the last thing we want to do is duplicate work or waste time where we have little input. So thank you. I really think they're very important comments, and the reason I mentioned public health earlier in the golden thread is because that's exactly how I see the business of this committee contributing across the council's work. Thank you. I have no other speakers and comments to be made, and apologies to Councillor Bradman and Gardner that Graham hasn't been able to respond to your specific queries, but I'm sure he will do following this meeting, and we can include his response in the minutes as if he were here, and so then members of the public can read that response. So we are asked members on this COVID-19 report to note the report and note its contents. I haven't heard any, we've certainly noted and commented on it. So I will take that as unanimously supporting the recommendations to note. Super, thank you. We will move then on to our last agenda item today, which is agenda item number 5, and this is the Environment and Sustainability Committee Agenda Plan, Training Plan and Appointments to Outside Bodies and Panels. We will now review the committee's agenda plan and training plan, as this is the first meeting after annual council. We are also being invited to make appointments to those outside bodies and internal advisory groups within the council's delegated area of responsibility. Will the Democratic Services Officer update the committee on the changes to the agenda plan since its publication? I'll hand over to James. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Chair. There have been no changes since publication.
Thank you very much. James, we just noted, and I've just seen that Graham's joined us again. Hi, Graham, nice to have you back. I noted the comment from Councillor Dupre earlier on the action plan. Graham, do you wish to comment on when that may come to a committee meeting, the action plan committed in the COVID report?
Chairman, can I just say as soon as possible? I think I don't see any reason why we shouldn't do it for the next meeting, but I'd like to just double check with colleagues. So can I say for next meeting, but then via James we can just double confirm that. But it's clearly important to do as soon as possible.
Thank you. That sounds infinitely sensible. So we'll have the addition on our next meeting of that item on our agenda plan, and if necessary, we can revisit that. But we'll put it on for the next agenda, next committee meeting. That being the case, members will note the agenda plan, and with that addition, we then move on to our training plan, and ask if there's any questions or comments on the training plan. This was produced and published separately this morning, and that's on the 28th of May. Do members have any comments or questions on this? Councillor Graham Wilson.
Raise my hand in all sorts of ways, Josh. The second item about climate change strategy is due to come in July. I just wonder whether it would be helpful for that to come in January and in June, as presumably that will include reference to flood risk and drought. And we've got in July a paper about flood risk data. So I think it'd be helpful for committee members to know a bit more about flood risk before we actually debate the topic in July. And if it was possible, therefore, to have that training in June, that would be helpful.
Thank you. We'll take that comment away. I certainly appreciate that it would be more timely to have the training before the substantive agenda item where we're going to be considering it. And so I'll ask officers to have a look at that and see if we can change that. Apologies, there's somebody at the door, so my dog has decided to contribute to the meeting, so I hope you can still hear me. With that noted, Councillor Wotherspoon, I know you also wish to make a comment on the agenda, the training plan.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I can't compete with your dog. Anyway, now looking through the items here, the one that I would wish to add, if and maybe others members have other topics they would be keen to see training on, but given that from time to time this committee will be asked to endorse or otherwise authorise the council's response to a number of planning matters around the county, particularly outline planning applications on major developments and observations on the evolving planning policy situation across the various districts. I would recommend that we have a briefing on the major developments which are in the pipeline across the county. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you. That sounds, again, infinitely sensible. And again, on the similar vein to Councillor Wilson's comment, we have a consultation response due in September to a major application. So if officers could look to factor in a training session on how we respond to those prior to that agenda item, that seems like it'd be most helpful. So with those additional comments and potential changes, I would just ask that members look out for an email following this meeting where those changes will be made. Sorry, and hopefully the changes to the dates for the June training for the flood management and climate change strategy will be able to be scheduled. I'm mindful that time is not on our side, but I'm sure officers will do their best to try and find a slot before that committee meeting. So that's the training plan noted and commented on. Thank you to those. Councillor Witherspoon, you still have a raised hand. Is that just for a hangover? Or?
Yeah, sorry, I just haven't got around to
removing. That's fine. I just didn't want to miss your comment. So thank you. I have no other raised hands or comments to be made. So we note our training plan, which moves on to the third part of the this agenda item, which is the appointment to outside bodies. I'm mindful that there are a number of appointments that need to be made to outside bodies. And I would like to thank Councillor Dupre for circulating the list of outside bodies representatives that sit within the Liberal Democrats group. And so would ask members to note that the majority of appointments to outside bodies in the list that we have are largely unchanged. However, there are some positions which we will be looking to appoint different members to. And so I will focus our attention on those appointments where we wish to make changes. I will just go back to have a look through, make sure I make the right changes here. So the outside bodies appointment that I would like to recommend changes to are on the recap board. Currently our representatives, oh, sorry, I'm trying to flip through documents. Yes, sorry, page numbers. So this is going to be difficult trying to go through 3 documents now, but I'll do my best to refer to the page numbers. Just bear with me one moment while I find those page numbers.
Hang on, I might, here we are, the recaps on page 22.
Thank you very much, that's really helpful. So on page 22, the current membership we have is Councillor Shooter, Matthew Shooter, and substitute Councillor William Hunt, Bill Hunt. And the recommended change to that is that I would take the substantive role as the member of this organisation, with Councillor Witherspoon to be the substitute. I understand that there is no intention to put anybody else, any other names forward for that, unless I hear any comments to the contrary. So we'll then move on to the next change, which is to the Cambridgeshire Waste PFI Member Steering Group. And again, I will find the page number for that. Just bear with me one moment. If anyone gets there before me, please feel free to jump in.
Chairman, I think you've jumped to the next item. I think you are on advisory group.
Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. I have indeed. So I will come back to that one. So then we have the only other change on this list, which is to the Anglian Great Ouse Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. And again, it's the removal of Councillor Matthew Shooter and to appoint myself as a representative. Now, I understand, Councillor Dupre, you wish to put a representative forward on this board as an alternative.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on the Great Ouse Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, I would like to propose that Councillor Graham Wilson be appointed to that committee alongside 2 Conservative members. You spoke earlier about the collaborative spirit of this group, and in that collaborative spirit, it would be rather nice to see some sharing of these roles, particularly as particularly the Great Ouse one covers such a wide number of divisions across the county. It would seem just a little greedy to take all 3 places on that, particularly given that Councillor Wilson is a former Environment Agency employee and has a background in civil engineering and has had a lot of experience working in the area of flooding, and would bring that to this role.
Thank you, and I appreciate your comments. But I think having liaised with Councillor Shooter and spoken about the remit of this this organisation is very closely linked to a lot of our business, and it was felt that the chairman of this committee would be appropriately placed on this organisation. And having Councillors Mandy Smith and Wotherspoon have previously been members, the continuity of that was also felt very important and necessary. So that's the justification. I've heard your comments. So unless there's any other proposals, I think it's probably best, the only way to move this forward is to move to the vote on those two options. And I'll ask James to conduct that vote, please, if you don't mind, James.
Thank you, Chair. So you'd like two separate votes, one for your nomination, Councillor du Preez, or?
I think if we just asked for the nominations, so it's either myself, Councillor Schumann, or Councillor Wilson, and members are asked to either vote for Councillor Schumann or Councillor Wilson, I think probably a tidy way to deal with it, if you're happy with that. Councillor Wilson, you have raised hand.
Well, yes, I just wanted to clarify. I'm not suggesting, or we're not suggesting, that you as chairman of this committee shouldn't be on that Great East Flood Defence Committee. I think that makes eminent sense. But we just feel that maybe one of the other two, Mandy Smith or Tim Wotherspoon, should not be reappointed, because this is a fresh appointment. It's not just a matter of continuation, and that for the reasons that Lorna has given, as well as this being a non-party political committee, it makes more sense to have a spread of representation, including somebody who's got decades of experience in flood risk management locally and nationally. So I would be keen for you to be on the committee, and I would suggest that either Mandy or Tim isn't.
Thank you. Well, and we have heard obviously the reason and justification merits of your putting on, but I've given our reasons and justifications, unless I don't think Councillor Wotherspoon, you necessarily need to come in or make comment. You've spoken to me prior to the meeting. So we have the two nominations, and I'd like James to ask members.
Sorry, that isn't, so, forgive me, Chairman, but that isn't what Councillor du Preez was proposing.
Councillor du Preez was proposing that Graham Wilson be put as one of the representatives. So we are simply taking a vote on whether that representative is myself and the removal of Councillor Shooter, which is obviously within the gift of the administration to take off who they want to. So the package that we are voting on is because the Councillor Smith wished to stay on, Councillor Wotherspoon, Councillor Shooter has asked to be removed. So therefore we have one vacancy, and the option is Councillor Wilson or myself. So that's what's on the table and being proposed. James, if I can now move to you to go through the list of names and members to respond with either Councillor Schumann or Councillor Wilson.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Bradman.
Councillor Wilson.
Councillor du Preez.
Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Gardner.
Councillor Schumann.
Councillor Gowing.
Councillor Schumann.
Councillor Hudson.
Councillor Schumann.
Councillor Schumann.
Councillor Schumann.
Councillor Scott.
Well, I think that we've all been put in a very difficult situation. I would prefer that Councillor Schumann remain because he's the chair, but I also don't like being put in a position where I have to vote for Councillor Schumann and against Councillor Wilson, because I do agree that it's good to have a diversity of political representation on all committees. So I'm going to abstain. I don't agree with the way that it's been handled.
Councillor Shooter.
Councillor Schumann.
Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Wotherspoon.
Councillor Schumann.
Thank you. I'll just count up the votes. So, Chair, that's 6 votes for Councillor Schumann, 3 votes for Councillor Wilson, and 1 abstention.
Thank you. And I note your comments, Councillor Scott, and apologies that I conducted in that way. It was fundamentally a proposal for all 3, as I explained, but we've obviously made a decision and we can move on to the next appointments. So That being the case, the first list of appendix, and apologies members, I don't know the appendix number. I don't believe there's any other proposals to change unless I have any other comments from members to change appointments on appendix 3, appointments to outside bodies. If you do, can you, oh, sorry, Councillor Wotherspoon, have I missed an appointment there?
Yes, it was just that I think it's the immediately following item, but I don't have the page open in front of me, but the Anglian Northern RFCC, we have Councillor Gowing as a substitute member on that one.
Not on my list.
This is page 12 of 26, I understand, Councillor Wotherspoon.
Yeah.
At the minute, we just have Councillor David Connor as the representative. Sorry, was that a question to add?
You, Chairman, I'm struggling to find the right page on my many screens, but it is the one where the substantive member is Councillor Connor, and we do have Councillor Gowing as a substitute.
Well, thank you, and that may be an error on the copying across of the reports. So I don't believe we wish to make any changes to that appointment, and Councillor Gowing is happy to stay as the substitute. So we'll just make sure that addition is put there. So Councillor Connor with the substitution of Councillor Gowing. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chairman. The other nomination, which I thought was contested, I did supply you with a nomination again of Councillor Graham Wilson for the Huntingdonshire Growth and Infrastructure Group, which is on page 19.
Thank you very much.
I did notify you of that in advance, and again,
You did.
as a local member, we'd like to put Councillor Wilson's name forward.
Thank you, and that has jogged my memory. Thank you. I spoke with Councillor Bates regarding this organisation. He informed me that this organisation hasn't met, and it would have been noted in their council's annual report that this organisation hasn't met in the last 12 months, and that there is a question mark about whether this organisation will meet in the future. Councillor Bates feels strongly that there is no need for us to have a representation at all on this organisation, because if it's not going to meet and it has no function, then it seems pointless for us to appoint a person to it. So what I've asked is that at the minute that the council, Cambridgeshire County Council, contact HDC to see whether this organisation is still intending to meet and have any function. If that is the case, if with your permission, Councillor Dupre and members of the committee, I intend to just leave that as a question mark for the council to go back to Huntingdon, and we can report that at the next committee when we always revisit appointments. And if it's going to meet, and if we do need to appoint somebody, then we can revisit the appointments then and make the necessary appointment. Is that okay with yourselves? Councillor Wilson?
I think that would be a bit confusing for the minutes. If Councillor Bates doesn't believe that this group meets, then we shouldn't record any representatives going to it. I'm happy that it's reconsidered next month, but
sorry, Councillor Wilson,
is that it doesn't meet, then we should just delete it and then reinstate it if it's needed in the future, not leave it as it is, because otherwise it implies with those representatives that this is a Tory dominated group, and it makes it party political. There's no attempt to have independent or other representation on it.
Well, thank you for your comments. My intention, and from my comments, was not that we would simply allow the status quo, but because it had, as I said, the annual report was that it hadn't met, that it would seem silly to appoint any change in membership to an organisation that we now believe doesn't have any function. If members have a difference of opinion, then I'm quite happy to consider the potential appointment or change of appointments, but it feels unnecessary, and for the sake of a few weeks we can go away, find out the information and revisit this item. So that's my suggestion from the chair, and unless I hear any comments to the contrary. Councillor Wotherspoon?
No, I was only going to say this in a similar vein. The one at the bottom of the list, the North Ustlesford Garden Community Delivery Board, that new community is very much in abeyance, following a letter from the local plan examiners to the council, suggesting that the North Ustlesford Garden Community was the least well evidenced of all its proposed new communities. So that group hasn't met since I was appointed to it, but I'm in the off chance that it might meet. Let's just leave that as it is.
Okay, thank you for that, and we note that that will be monitored. Councillor Bradman.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to say that if the intention of the council is not to send representatives to the Huntingdonshire Growth and Infrastructure Group, we shouldn't be listing them in this report.
Okay, I think, I've heard a couple of comments, and I have no problem in following on from Councillor Bates's comments that as one of our representatives, that they are not meeting. I have no problem with deleting that organisation, and if we have to reappoint following consultation with the Huntingdon District Council, we can add it to the list as Councillor Wilson suggested, and then we can consider its membership. So, James, if we can note the deletion of that outside body, because it just seems pointless to have it on there. Thank you. So I think that now does conclude, and thank you, Councillor Dupre, apologies I missed that. That does conclude Appendix 3 list of outside bodies, with no other alterations, and the agreed alterations, we had one earlier. I'll move on to the next appendix, Appendix 4, and the appointments to outside bodies on this list. I'm trying to flip through screens again. And this is to the advisory bodies and working groups panel, and this is the Climate Change and Environment Strategy Advisory Group. And I just wish to make one alteration on this group, and that is to remove Councillor Simon King from this group. And I've spoken with Councillor King, and I will be taking Councillor King's role, which I thought was probably sensible with this new committee. I don't believe I have any other, just only to confirm, Councillor Dupre has confirmed that Councillor Dupre will continue to sit on that working group. I don't believe there's any other changes to that appendix and that item. Councillor Dupre?
Chairman, again, I thought I had notified you of a couple of advisory groups and panel nominations.
This on Appendix 4?
Yeah, there are 3 advisory groups. We had a last minute additional one, which was to reinstate the climate steering group, but the other 2 advisory groups and panels are also at Appendix 4 as far as I have on my papers, which are the Waste PFI Member Steering Group and the Local Access Forum.
I was coming on to those, but I haven't got those under, if I click on the Appendix 4, the only one that comes up is the Climate Action Group, so I don't know why.
Yeah, they are Appendix 4. They were in the original agenda bundle.
It's page 25 in the agenda?
Yeah, page 25 of the agenda bundle.
Thank you very much. I will come to that then. Yes, okay. So that's the confusion. There's 2 separate pages on Appendix 4. The one separate one which we've identified, which is the Climate Change Action Group. Now we move on to Appendix 4 and the list, which is starting from page 25 in our agenda. Thank you, Councillor Dupre, for that clarity. And yes, you have advised me that you wish to make some recommended changes to those. If you'd like to talk to those and your recommendations to change the memberships.
Thank you, Chair. On the Waste PFI Member Steering Group, again, my earlier comment applies about the collegiate nature, as you stated, of this committee, and my suggestion is that that would indicate that there shouldn't be 3 Conservative appointments, shouldn't be 100% of the representation on the steering group. I'd like to nominate Councillor Anna Bradnam as the local member for the division that includes the Amy plant at Waterbeach. On the Local Access Forum, again, 2 places, both Conservative nominations. That also doesn't seem to me very collegiate, and I'd like to put my own name forward. I don't think this should be a particularly party political forum, and I would very much hope that we would be able to work cross-party on a lot of these environment and sustainability issues as we have done in the past.
Thank you very much for both of those. We will take those individually in one moment. With regard to the AMI PFI, having spoken with the leader of the council and deputy leader, and the nature of the contract being such substance to the Cambridgeshire County Council, they both wish to remain on that board for obvious reasons. And again, because of the position that I now hold as chairman of this committee, and in consultation with Councillor Shooter, I think it's appropriate that I would also take that third position. That's reflective of the administration and the contract, the size of the contract that we have with Amy through this PFI. So, but I again to note your tabled alternatives. And with regard to the Local Access Forum, having spoken with the members who currently sit on it, they are both they are very keen to stay on, and would have asked that they continue to do so. And I have no reason to make any alterations to those members because they've provided updates and reports which I'm content with. And as the administration, I think it's right that they continue to be the representatives of this committee. So I have Councillor Wilson wish to comment.
Thank you, Chairman. On the Cambridgeshire Waste PFI member steering group, because it's a member steering group, it comprises councillors. So what scope is there for you to go back to that group and ask that the number of county councillors should be increased by one in order that Councillor Dupre could be included in it? Would you be happy to have Councillor Dupre on the group, or is it simply that you want to ensure that it's dominated by Tories?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Wilson. I think Councillor Dupre's proposal was actually put Councillor Bradman as the local member on that PFI contract work group. But yeah, that's fine. I note your comment. I'll certainly take that comment away, and I will speak with the representatives to see whether we have how much control we have over the membership of that organisation, and if we can make any reviews or changes, I will bring it back to the following meeting. So we can put that down as an action, please, James, that I will report back at the June meeting. But thank you for the suggestion. Councillor Wilson, you still have your raised hand. I presume that's just a hangover. I don't want to miss it. Thank you. So we have those two proposals from Councillor Dupre. In a similar vein, I intend to put the proposals for the members to stay the same on the Local Access Forum, and to replace Councillor Shooter with myself on the PFI with Amy working group or outside body. So I will move again. I think the most appropriate way is to move to the vote. Are members happy to take those together? I think it makes sense. And the way that this vote would probably be best held is Councillor Dupre, your proposal, I invited that first. So the proposal from Councillor Dupre is to appoint Councillor Anna Bradman to the PFI outside body with Amy, and to propose Councillor Dupre herself for the one of the positions of the Local Access Forum. And my proposal, we'll take that proposal. So if you are for that, then you just simply say for, or against, then simply say against, and we'll obviously move on to my proposals afterwards. James, if you'd like to conduct that vote, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Sorry, could I just clarify? Sorry, I'm just wanting to clarify. If we vote for, does that mean that we're voting against you going on these committees, Councillor Schumann? I just want to be clear about what we're voting.
Sorry, yes, apologies, I probably didn't explain it clearly enough. So yes, to vote for Councillor Dupre's proposals would mean that I didn't take the position to the outside body on the PFI Amy contract, and that Councillor Dupre would take one of the positions on the Local Access Forum. So that's a vote for. And a vote against will be a subsequent proposal from myself to take their positions.
Thank you.
Thank you. So James, handing over to you. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, just to confirm again, would you rather we just do the PFI first? So the vote is either in favour of you being appointed or Councillor Bradman. Would you rather do that first?
I will yield to your superior knowledge as Democratic Services Officer, and so if you think that's probably the most appropriate way, I'll let you conduct that and explain the vote and how.
Okay, thank you. So just to confirm to members, we are now voting on the Cambridgeshire Waste PFI member steering group to either appoint Councillor Schumann to replace Councillor Matthew Shooter, or Councillor Bradnam to replace Councillor Matthew Shooter? That's understood. Okay. Councillor Bradnam?
Councillor Bradnam.
Councillor Dupre?
Councillor Bradnam.
Councillor Gardner?
Councillor Schumann.
Councillor Gowing?
Councillor Schumann.
Councillor Hudson?
Councillor Schumann.
Councillor Schumann?
Councillor Schumann.
Councillor Scott?
Councillor Bradnam, on the basis that Councillor Schumann returns to his colleagues and endeavours to ensure that one of them stands down so that Councillor Schumann can be on the committee also, because I do believe Councillor Schumann should be there, but I agree with the proposition that there needs to be political diversity. Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to say it.
Councillor Shooter?
Councillor Schumann.
Councillor Wilson?
Councillor Bradnam.
And Councillor Wotherspoon.
Councillor Schumann.
Thank you. I'll just count up the votes now. That's 6 votes in favour of Councillor Schumann and 4 votes in favour of Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you very much, James. And then we'll move to the last appointment, which is being contested. And for the ease of understanding, so members can easily cast the vote, this proposal would be to remove Councillor Simon King, simply because he's the first at the list, and replace with Councillor Dupre. And so members are voting either for Councillor King or Councillor Dupre to be the representative. Thank you, James, if you'd like to conduct the vote again.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam.
I think if members could lip read, Councillor Bradnam, you were muted, but I could see you saying Councillor Dupre.
Sorry, Councillor Dupre, I do apologise.
Councillor Dupre.
Councillor Dupre.
Councillor Gardner.
Councillor King.
Councillor Gowing.
Councillor King.
Councillor Hudson.
Councillor King.
Councillor Scott.
Councillor Dupre, but please do let Councillor King know that it's not a personal comment against Councillor King. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Dupre.
And Councillor Wotherspoon.
Councillor King.
Apologies, James. I didn't vote, but my vote would have been for Councillor King. You both Councillor Shooter and myself, I believe.
Oh, my apologies. Councillor Schumann.
Councillor King.
Councillor Shooter.
Councillor King.
My apologies. Thank you. That's 6 votes in favour of keeping Councillor King and 4 votes for Councillor Dupre.
Thank you very much, James. And that is all of the appointments to outside bodies that I've been informed of any changes, and we've gone through those and appointed the necessary changes as we've just done. The only question mark I have over one appointment, and just for Councillor Scott to potentially take away, is Councillor Whitehead is still the representative on the Cambridge Marshall's Airport Forum, I believe. And I didn't know if that was going to be an ongoing situation or whether you wanted to consider that at a later date.
Yeah, I did notice that, and I will discuss it with my group. Thanks, Councillor Schumann.
Not at all. Thank you very much. Members, we are now asked to note the recommendations on this agenda item. They are recommendations A and B and C, I believe, is just, oh, sorry, the agenda, oh, sorry, I'm just going to go back to the agenda item so I can be clear, because I presume members will just wish to take these separately, but I'm sure that some of them will be in complete agreement. So just bear with me while I get to the right cover page.
Chairman, have we done the climate change appendix?
We did, and the only change, Councillor Wilson, was that I would be replacing Councillor King on that, but all other members will stay the same. Thank you. And now I've got the cover page, which is at page number 3 of 26. And the committee is asked recommendation A, to review its agenda plan. We have done that. B, review its training plan. We have done that. C, agree the appointments to outside bodies. in detailed in Appendix 3. We obviously have had some disagreement of those. Would members like to take a vote on that recommendation C separately? Councillor Dupre?
Sorry, Chairman, what I was going to say was that the recommendations, sorry, I'm scrolling up to find them now. The recommendations suggest at E that appointments of representatives to any outstanding outside bodies, etc., be delegated. However, in respect of the discussion that we had about the Waterbeach PFI, you undertook to come back to committee on that. So can I ask that we either amend that recommendation or add an additional recommendation to say that you will approach the Waterbeach PFI people about that committee and the potential for an additional place and come back to this committee?
Thank you. I'm happy with that additional note on that recommendation E, that we report back on that one outside body.
And also to say that I'm not, having had the protracted votes on all the individual committees where there was a contest, I'm not particularly sensible of the need to press that to a vote, having had votes on all the individual items.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, you wish to comment?
Well, just to clarify, in recommendation E, as well as the waste PFI, you also agreed to come back about Hunt's infrastructure and growth group. So if that could be incorporated.
Thank you. Thank you. And Councillor Bradman, did you want to wish to make a comment?
No, I was, no, that's fine.
Thank you. So members, I will take these collectively then. So I will take A, B, C, D and E. E with the additional comment on the recommendation, which is that the chairman will report back on the Amy CESPA PFI working group as an outside body and the Huntingdon Infrastructure Growth Group outside body at the following meeting. So with that addition to recommendation E, I'll take those collectively, and thank you, Councillor Dupre, to agreeing to take those collectively. Can I have an indication of, if you, sorry.
What I was going to say was, can we not take it by affirmation then?
Absolutely. So if I would take it as affirmation, unless I have received a blue hand from anybody to say that they disagree with the recommendations A to E. Good, that's great. I've received no blue hands, so we can take those as unanimously affirmed. So thank you, members. That does conclude our business. Let me just check my script and thank James for his work that he's done in making sure I've kept to it. And before I bring the meeting officially to a close, I just wish to place on record as a final comment, certainly from my perspective, my sincere thanks to Councillor Shooter for any of the work that he previously undertook as the chairman of the previous carnation of some of the business of this committee. And thank him for continuing to stay on this committee, as his sage advice and comments will be, I'm sure, incredibly helpful. So thank you very much, Councillor Shooter. So members, that concludes our business, and I will look forward to seeing you all at a subsequent meeting. Thank you, officers.
Before you close the meeting, could I just make an administrative point, please? Well, or rather, after you've closed the meeting, but before you close the Zoom link, is what I meant.
Then I'll ask the Democratic officers to close the YouTube live channel as we will be concluding as we conclude this meeting. Thank you very much.